Welcome to the Business of School podcast, brought to you by Cole Connect. Get ready for a journey of topical insights, engaging conversations, and maybe a few aha moments from the business, finance, and technology side of schools. Cole School experts are your host, and with our guests from the world of education, we're about to embark on a learning adventure to support you in the business of your school. Join us, along with marketing guru Timo Nieuwoudt from Digistorm, as we deep dive into the school admissions and marketing arena. Digistorm has developed cutting-edge technologies to streamline school administrative processes. Let's find out how schools are navigating change management, structuring their teams, and how the business office can ensure their teams are using tools to the benefit of the school. Welcome, Timo, to the Business School podcast.
Thank you. Good to be here.
It's great to have you here, and lovely to have you visiting the home of Cole School experts as well.
Always love coming down to Adelaide.
Yeah. And also, we've got a really intriguing topic to talk about today. Before we do that, maybe just tell us a little bit more about Digistorm, because there's many schools that use Digistorm, but those of you that don't know you, tell us a little more.
Yeah, so I'm Timo. I look after all things marketing at Digistorm and our parent company called Bursars. So I look after all of our brands for Asia Pacific. Digistorm was originally the first company to start a school app in Australia about 12, 13 years ago now. Our founders,
been that long?
Yeah, it's been that long.
Wow.
So Tim Oswald, our founder, was working at a school on the Gold Coast, just sort of a uni job kind of thing. The school principal was very forward thinking and asked him if, can you make an app for the school? Which he had a play, and it worked, and the school loved it. And within 6 months, we had 6 or 7 clients. And Chris then came on board and spoke to a few more schools. And before we knew it, these schools were taking up apps all across Queensland and eventually Australia. Those customers then asked us if we could do their websites for them, which was sort of our second product. Schools were still sending out paper forms back in the day, so doing 25-page enrollment forms.
You're not saying schools are still using paper?
Very few, fortunately. However, those schools then came to us and said, we've got this website that you've done for us. Can you somehow put the form onto the website for us? Which we then did, and that eventually turned into Funnel, which most of our schools are using today, which is an online sort of CRM system and helps with the admissions process.
It's become a bit of a household name in the school sector.
We're very fortunate.
Funnel, we all know what they're talking about.
We're so fortunate. So many schools across Australia kind of joined us at some point in our journey, and then either have a bunch of our products or are still just using one of them. And we were very lucky that most of our products were sort of first to market, and then obviously, that kind of changes the industry. And we've grown with our schools because a lot of these products were new when we started them, and they just didn't exist in the market. So we've been very fortunate and very grateful to still have most of our original schools on board with us.
That's brilliant.
That's right.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Then about 12 months ago, we got acquired by a company called Bursars, a very large school management system from the US. They've got over 3,000 schools across the world that they work with. So a really big global company, and we're seeing locally so much of that stuff, that knowledge really transferring into our team and helping us out with better processes and things that our little small business could really do with a bit of help with.
Like you and Digistorm have been in this business for a long time now, and so specialised in the marketing admissions field.
Yep.
What trends are you seeing from schools at the moment in that area?
Yeah, so super interesting. So we really speak to generally the marketing person at the school, the admissions head, so director of admissions and so on. In some ways then supported by the business office or the IT director. Some of the stuff that we're seeing is generally enrollments are still increasing across the country, which is really good. It's great.
We're hearing that too, and it's just so good for the sector, especially in the economic environment we're in at the moment.
Yeah, and it seems to be across the country for us too. So we do a big annual state of admissions survey late in the year for the following year. So the one we did in January really showed, I think it was around 66 or 67% of schools said that they had seen an increase in their enrollments in the year before. That's across metros, regional areas, Catholic, independent, etc. So that's sort of the first trend that we're seeing, is that more people want to send their kids to private school. The second thing we're seeing is that admissions teams specifically aren't really growing. So around 2/3 of admissions teams are 1 or 2 people. So it's a reasonably lean team within the business of the school. And that number's not really shifted over the last few years. So that's sort of number two, is that team's quite stretched in terms of what they do.
And are you still finding that it's very much a shared role as well?
Absolutely.
Still in schools?
Absolutely. So typically what we see is, let's say there's 2.25, if you want to be specific, sort of the median number per school.
So they're having to wear more than one hat, a lot of these people.
Exactly. And typically what we see, those hats would be something in administration. So they're supporting some form of administration, within the school. And then the second piece to the admissions team is your registrar, for example, or enrollments officer might also be doubling up as a comms person or work in the marketing team. Now, schools are structuring this very differently. Some of them would have 2 physical people sitting in the office the whole week and kind of doing these tasks. Other schools might have 1 full-time person as an enrollments officer, and then another person who works 2 days in an enrollments capacity and potentially 2 or 3 days in another capacity. So very interesting to see how schools kind of put it together. But of administration, Marcoms, and a little bit of teaching aid has come through too. So interesting how this person has to jump from a very administrative heavy role into sometimes a job that's a little bit more creative, thinking if they're in the classroom or writing communication to their communities.
No, it's a very unique skill set
that's it, exactly.
the schools are looking for.
So those are sort of the 2 top trends, I'd say. And then the third one that we've also seen is that waitlisting. So during the admissions process, so because these enrollments are going up, but there's a limited number of seats in each school, right, for each year. Waitlisting is really a problem some schools in Australia really have to face now, it used to be a big problem for some of the tier 1 schools in most capital cities, but that's becoming a bit of a challenge for schools who've never had to deal with that before.
Okay. And just before we look at how schools are tackling some of those challenges, you mentioned the annual survey that you do. If I remember rightly, is that available for information on your website for people to log in and get a copy of that?
That's right, yeah. So you could just jump onto insights.digistorm.com and you'll find it there. Otherwise, if you are one of our schools, just reach out to your contact person and we can get you a copy.
No, I remember seeing the last version of that. It was really, really good. So
super interesting.
Definitely worth looking at.
Interesting numbers in there.
These challenges you've highlighted, how are you finding that schools are facing these now and what they're doing to tackle them and to try and turn them into some sort of solution? Yeah,
it really depends on the school and the experience that they've got and how they kind of align these to their strategic goals. So I guess if you look at the structure of the school, we're seeing a lot of schools moving into more of a advancement team. So where typically marketing, admissions were separate entities within the office. Yeah. We're now seeing fundraising coming into that and all kind of living under this advancement director role. So that's something that's kind of happening all across the country. And what that kind of brings is a bit of synergy. So schools can then look at who am I marketing to? So for example, I am marketing to year 7 entrants in 2026 is the year that's important to me and then where we need numbers. The enrollments team can really focus on that and surface candidates and future families that kind of fit that bill. But then also the advancement team, so as in your alumni communities, fundraising leg is becoming a little bit stronger as schools want to diversify their income. So the structure of the teams really have a significant impact and is a bit of a change that we see. And then the second piece is that because of these synergies, the admission/marketing team starts working a lot closer with the business office and with the IT director. So the team's quite stretched. They have all of these multiple hats that they wear, but they've still got 37, 40 hours a week to work. Enrollments is increasing at a rapid speed. Parents are expecting more during the enrollments process. So typically what happens is something breaks and they need to go and figure out how they fix that. And that's typically where this sort of alignment starts happening. They jump on a phone call together or they see what tooling they can find. Can they resource things differently and how can they kind of move the admissions process along so they can hit those numbers as a school.
And you mentioned there as well the expectations of the parent cohort. How is that changing?
It's incredible. It's just schools just keep on telling us that it's becoming more complex. So when we started Funnel, I remember about 4 or 5 years ago, we would have I think we had around 30% of schools with some form of a digital enrollment journey. So it was quite a small percentage. That's up to over 90% of schools now have a digital enrollment.
Yeah.
And then what we used to look at was the number of touch points. So that's gone from 3 or 4 touch points. So if you think of potentially an inquiry form that comes through with a prospectus, maybe a open day kind of situation, and then actually applying for enrollment. Those were the 3 typical steps, where we now see up to 7 or 8 steps in that journey. So there's welcome emails, there's nurturing emails on a child's birthday while they're on the wait list. There's open days, there's individual open days at times, or private tours. There's so many things, interviews with staff members before even going into pre-enrollment and then enrollment. So the journey is becoming quite complex, and a lot of this can be automated, which schools are leaning into because it helps them to save time, so they can then focus on the personal touches. But yeah, it's becoming quite complex. Topics that come up and questions that parents ask, a lot around well-being. I think the whole student experience is becoming quite important to parents during the admissions process. They want to have quite detailed information, how the school will support their child, especially if there's some unique, learning needs or social needs that the child might have. And then the third piece is, there was an interesting question. We asked schools, how does it feel? So sort of the emotional feeling about dealing with all of this increase of communication expectations. And schools rated it felt 97% more intense than it did before. So we spoke to a few enrollments officers, and they all concur that they just spent hours on the phone talking to families. It's all individual conversations. But then the administrative work still needs to happen. So these teams are really stretching. They're kind of trying their best to speak to these parents.
Yeah. And it's a different skill set or a different focus of your brand as well. Whereas historically it was all about how the educational excellence you've got as a school. Whereas now it's demonstrating to the parents that you care, and the welfare of the child and your ability to nurture them is just as important. And this is how we do it. So that in itself will create all these extra touch points in the process, and the marketing and admissions officers have to be very much aware of that, and how can we show the community this is what we do here at the school.
Exactly. And so encouraging. If you think of, for all of us, if we make a major purchase, if you spend a bit of money on a big car or a mortgage application or something that's a fairly significant investment, you'd expect a pretty solid customer experience. And I think that was one thing that a lot of schools never used to think that way, but driven largely by the business office. And if the sort of marketing or admissions team has a seat at the leadership table, you see a lot of schools really putting customer experience as part of their strategic plans. And I think that's driving a lot of it, is meeting these families where they kind of want to be met for the investment that they're making.
And you mentioned there as well the business office supporting that.
Yeah.
That's where I want to go really next. It's like how do you think the business office can enable or support the admissions department team and the goals of the school at the moment, because they are becoming a lot more collaborative, aren't they? Within those two teams. How are we seeing that happening, changing in schools?
I think it's such an important topic, right? It's two very different offices within the same school. I think the business office has such a wonderful role to play in getting cohesion within the larger school community. If they look at what the strategic goals are and then support all of these different functionalities to unlock operationally what will support them to get to these goals. So for example, let's say admissions is a priority for a school. They want to get a certain number of new students, or there's additional classroom facilities that they need to fill, or whatever the case might be, is working really closely with the admissions team. Number one, seeing if they have the right people in place. That's always a big challenge, is do we have the right people that can drive this change? And then how do we support these people to actually do the job and get us to this big milestone that we're chasing? And a lot of that sits either in resourcing them differently, which we know is a challenge. Schools also have budgets and that kind of thing can be quite tricky. The second piece is, how do we make them more efficient? So can we bring in tooling, for example? So this is typically where we see on some of our products, like with Funnel, where the business office, the admissions team, the IT director would sit together and kind of see, okay, how does this tool enable better efficiency for the team? So that's sort of a big
really
portion.
Automation into the workflow.
Exactly. So there's kind of like looking at, can we unlock automation for some of the easy tasks so that the team can focus on speaking to families and converting them. There's that element, but then also helping and understanding that a enrollments officer or director of admission is not necessarily the best person to be presenting a business case to bring in a new tool. So kind of helping them and guiding them onto what's important to you to look at. when they do come to you with a business case or with an operational problem to solve, and working together to find solutions there. So I think that's something where we're seeing schools working quite well together with their business office now, from the admissions and IT team. And then conversely, the biggest question we get from business managers of existing customers is, how do I know my admissions team is using your tools to the max? How do I know that they have, they've got everything set up that they need, that we're getting the most out of the tool? Because there's obviously an investment in the tool. We want schools to get value for it. So very typically, we host webinars almost every month where all of our funnel users get together, and we have 200-300 schools kind of join and see. We focus on one area of the tool. So what we often tell business managers is, speak to your admissions team, make sure that they join one of these. We cover a topic, they can set the stuff up just after the webinar, and they'll be getting more and more out of the tool every month. That's one way. And then the second thing is getting the team to really work with their customer success manager on our side or at any of the tools, and making sure that they're set up for success. Very often when you bring a new tool in, there's a bit of a honeymoon period, and the school sets up the basics, but then life gets busy and they just don't have the time to get it done. We all know that the teams are sort of pushed to capacity at times.
Everyone's resource poor at the moment.
Exactly right. So, and we added 150 odd new features to funnel in the last year and a half. So it's very easy to not be up to date with all of the new things that you can do with the tool. So really encourage business managers to work with anybody in the school, but especially the admissions team, to make sure they're getting the most out of the tool, they set up for success, and that whatever they're doing is aligning with the strategic goals of the school. I think that's a really, really crucial piece, that sometimes we just need that one person to come and reset things. And I think a CFO or a head of the business/operation side of the school is such a key person to be able to say, hey, let's take a breather, let's take a step out and see what we're doing today. Is this still aligning us? Is this still going to get us to where we want to be in a year or two from now? And then kind of seeing what the team needs to get there.
Yeah, that's great. And it is so good to see many of these business teams collaborating a lot more in schools together now, rather than being in their separate silos, which is fantastic, because the value and the benefit they can get out of that is absolutely brilliant.
I think kudos to business managers in general in Australia. I think they are leading the charge in terms of professionalizing the organization that is a school, the business side of it, the commercial side of it. We can see it when we go to ASBA conferences, if we meet with business managers across the country. There's a general professionalization of the industry, which is so encouraging, and there's
an acceptance that we're a multi-million-dollar business and we have to work effective and efficiently.
That's right.
To meet the goals of the school.
That's right. And even for us as a supplier, it challenges us to do new things. We would never have delivered 150 new features if it wasn't driven by the people in the school saying like, hey, we need a new way of doing wait lists.
Thought about doing this.
That's it. We need to surface, find a way of, we've got 100 people on a wait list for next year. How do we surface candidates that are, best for our school? And these are all kind of questions that are very often driven by a well-aligned business and admissions office working towards a specific strategic goal.
What was the most unique or unexpected request that you've had recently? Thought, wow, we'd never thought about that.
Yeah, so we get quite a few of those. There's actually one that we got in the US. So we operate in America too, and they do what's called recommendations. So effectively during the enrollments process, you could send off a form to, it could be a referee of some nature. So it could be religious, it could be an old teacher, it could be a character reference. And a lot of schools in the US use that as part of their decision-making process during enrollments to surface candidates that they really want to work with. And we kind of just showed it to a few local schools, and quite a few schools have kind of asked a few more questions about that, and seeing if they can incorporate that into the way that they kind of look at enrollments and see if they can add that in. The second thing that's been really popular for us is automations, because the teams are so stretched. So we've seen a massive uptake in automating very simple tasks within specifically funnels. So a family would send an inquiry form through the website of the school saying like, hey, I want more information. Instead of the enrollments officer getting back to the family on Monday morning with a phone call and not being able to reach the parents, because none of us answer a phone anymore, there's an automated email that sends through a prospectus or links them through to somewhere where they can find information. and then a follow-up call a few days later to make it a little bit easier.
Trying to look into your crystal ball going forward, Timo, like Australia is facing some unique population changes and economic challenges at the moment. Where do you think that's going to start affecting admissions going forward for schools?
I think schools.
I'm not going to hold you accountable to this. But Timo said this.
That's it. I can never show my face at a conference again after that. I think it's hard to say. I think our schools are in a good position. I think I think as a community, as a wider sort of Australian community, we still want our kids to have a really good education. We see the value in sending our kids to an independent school. Number one, for the academic and the whole child kind of experience that brings, but also for the long-term effects of networking and all of the stuff that goes with that. So I think we're in a good position there. Cost of living, migration from the big metros into regional areas, I think will support growth of regional schools specifically. We see quite good, see quite good growth in regional areas, and then I think a continued professionalization of the industry. So becoming, sort of leading edge when it comes to the whole parent/guest experience or customer experience, I think is going to just be driven by parents expecting more, and schools, wanting to be more competitive and put a face forward of being a technology, customer-centric, forward-thinking school, not just in academics, but in the whole experience that you get from the school. There's also some really creative and interesting people coming into the industry from traditional corporate backgrounds.
Yeah, we're seeing that as well. We were talking about that earlier, weren't we?
That's right.
It's a good influence in the sector.
Absolutely, and it's so wonderful to see them coming in and changing the way that schools think about, especially in our sort of little niche of marketing and admissions, bringing in customer journeys like almost stuff that the big banks can do really well. We're starting to see that stuff coming through to schools. We're seeing amazing trends in terms of like the way schools communicate with parents, the way that they personalize information to parents. There's some interesting things happening in the industry which I'm excited for.
Yeah, I think the independent school sector the future is very bright, and it's so good to see schools embracing innovation and trying to do things differently and better.
That's right. Brilliant. And I think schools should be, the people working in our industry should be very proud of how they embrace education themselves. So we're all out there effectively wanting to help future generations, right, by enabling education for us as suppliers, for you that work in the industry, for people who work frontline within schools. And I think what I really, really enjoy is that so many people working in schools go to conferences, they go to events.
Self-learning, development.
So much of that. And I think it's probably the most of any industry I've ever worked in. And I think that ownership over your own education is what will drive us forward as a collective. Over the next few years, there's only about 3,000 or 4,000 of us that work in this industry, if you count us all as human, sort of on the administrative side of the schools within the country. So it's not a big mass of us that kind of need to move forward. And if we're all spending a little bit of time on self-development and how can we grow our careers and the way we look at things, the whole industry will move forward pretty rapidly. Definitely.
And that's one of the reasons why we're so appreciative of you coming on here on the podcast today to share these insights and to hopefully help our listeners to do just that. It's all a journey of growth and development and learning. So we really appreciate you coming and sitting in the hot seat today on the business of school, and always enjoyable to chat with you, Timo, and look forward to next time.
It's a great community to be part of. Thank you.
Thank you. See you.
Thanks.
And that's a wrap for this episode of the Business of School podcast. We've enjoyed the conversation today and would love to have you join us for future episodes. Please hit the subscribe button and follow the links below to find more information and resources to support you and your school team. Until next time, keep being innovative, keep being awesome, and remember, there is always opportunity to improve on the journey. Thanks for connecting.